Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I'm excited to interview Brenda Neckvatal, and let me tell you about Brenda. She is a two-time best-selling author, an award-winning HR professional, and a serial entrepreneur who has been featured in publications such as Forbes, Entrepreneur, Fast Company Inc., and U.S. News and World Reports. Perseverance, integrity, and relentless optimism are just a few of the ingredients you experience when meeting and working with Brenda. Not only does she help in crisis management and group dynamics, she is a mentor to leaders, managers of all levels, and uses that Fortune 500 experience to help work through and deal with difficult people, as well as build, develop, and lead high-performing teams. So we are going to talk just about that today, becoming a true leader in the face of difficult people problems. So please join me in welcoming my guest, Brenda Neckvatal. Brenda. Yeah, so I don't think there's any business, any company, especially large, that doesn't have this issue come up. And how people handle it is not always the best.
No, that's very true. I totally agree. And thank you very much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this and getting the opportunity to have the conversation. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this isn't an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting more and more complicated generationally.
Yes.
So we've got 4 major generations still in the workforce, and we have a rising new generation that's coming that we haven't even yet started to figure out.
Yeah.
And when the specialists started communicating to us what they thought Gen Z was going to look like, they missed the mark on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Completely missed the mark on it. And we're having to kind of learn all over again.
Yep, that is so true. Well, before we get into all of the good stuff, I want to just ask my 2 simple first questions. The first one is just tell everybody, where do you call home? Where do you live right now?
So I live over in the Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach-ish area, and I've been here 12 and a half years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So where were you originally from?
So we go backwards. I moved to Virginia in Richmond back in the back end of 2006. And before that, I was in the Chicagoland, Wisconsin area for about 10 years. Prior to that, I was home in Hawaii. As half of my home. And then I grew up and was raised in Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So Hawaii was back before my life.
You have the Hawaiian look. You have the Midwestern accent still.
Do I?
Yeah, and I'm a Pittsburgh girl, but I never would have got Pennsylvania out of your accent. So
yeah, well, so my hometown is in Erie.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm one of those individuals that my accent changes wherever I am. So now I've got more of a Virginia twang, but I go back up to Pennsylvania once, maybe twice now a year. I have friends up that are like family, and
nice.
all of a sudden that Prittner starts coming out. I never got into yins though. I never got into saying
me either. But yeah, I do have brothers, sisters, and other relatives that do that. And then they also say, and that. They
I do that
their
a lot.
sentence, and that. And I'm like, what is this? And anyway, enough of that.
We're hardy people. What can I say?
That's exactly right. So the second question is, we gave all the business stuff and the accolades and where you are today and all, but I love for you to share your journey that really shaped the expertise that you have in dealing with difficult people and workplace drama.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have moved to working from home just to avoid some of that workplace
I
drama.
would agree with you. There's a benefit to it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a plus and minus to everything.
Yeah,
And,
that's exactly right.
it's one thing is that you don't have to deal and tolerate with a lot of the, angst that comes with people with different mindsets, different attitudes about things. And, pulling people together into one solid function and creating that level of harmony is really challenging, except if you abide by certain principles to it, right?
Yeah.
For me, I had, so I'm dyslexic, so I process data and information differently,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also extremely direct. And, it's really funny is like, I find that I have the most success when I'm direct about things, but where if I, and I have done this in the past where I've taken people's advice and like, well, you can't talk to people that way, and you can't, you have to address them this way. And very long story short, what I discovered is that I started managing people differently with different sets of standards because I was trying to be the fit in type of manager. I was trying to be the HR person that could, work with everybody. And I'm going to tell you right now, it does not work. It really does not work. Being an HR leader, it means that you have to deal with a wide variety of people, including the ones that drive you absolutely nuts. And that's no different than, any other
Any
leader
job.
would have to do. Right,
A
exactly.
project manager for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I discovered along the way is that you can set the same expectation with everybody. And so it maybe isn't so much what you say, but how you say it. So long as it's the
Absolutely.
same expectation and the same principle, but they have to be formed based off of principles, founding principles that they don't waver. They're your guiding light.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of like the best leaders that I've worked with, and still to this day, that people that I know in my inner circle that are super close all have standing principles and nobody fluctuates from them.
Right, right. And that consistency, I think, is so very important because, it's like uh, I had certain managers that worked with me and I knew how they acted and reacted and so, but I expected that for them to be that way, and if they were different, then that kind of throws you off and you're wondering, well, why are you acting that way? That's not the way you normally act.
Yeah.
So I think consistency is very important. You talk about the importance of finding patterns in people's behavior. So, as we were just discussing, what what's the skill that has helped you to be that stronger leader, to really be able to recognize those patterns and behaviors and to be able to manage?
So I have a weird innate gift. Like we all have innate gifts, and mine is like I can see patterns in things. Like I can instantly dissect. Like I can see if we want to get to X, here's what we have to do to get there. Like when I was younger, I still can do that to this day. I can stand next to a vehicle, a running engine, and I can actually tell you if the timing is off. I just have this,
Uh,
yeah, I just
that's
have
it.
this mechanical ability, right? But what I discovered was it was finding this pathway or finding these patterns or finding the way. And so when I started looking at people and trying to figure out like how can I get better at understanding what people are really trying to tell me, so it was really honestly with a lot of time and a lot of observation to see how people would respond and react, including myself in different situations. Like if I knew I was going to get in trouble with something, it was kind of interesting to look inward and see how I was reacting, because then what I was doing is I was also looking outward and I see people do exactly the same thing. So I'm like, there's a pattern to this. And I
Mhm.
got so good at it that with my clients, they're like, I got a guy who's blah, 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 or I have a woman who's blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so expect this to happen. And they call me back. They're like, oh my gosh, it actually did. And I said, happens every time. They're like, what do
Mm,
you mean happens every time? I said, because when people get like this, then here's their general response. Now, it may not be
right.
an exact science, but I can tell you in general that when they're up against the ropes because of this, they're going to respond in a certain way. I said,
Hmm.
here's how, here, if you really want to make a breakthrough with this person, then here's your approach. And I would get the phone call back that said, yeah, it really worked. And I said, because what we're doing is we're taking out the person and we're addressing the behavior. And that is the biggest thing right there.
Yeah,
That if you address the behavior and not the person, you're going to be way more effective. And if you're dealing with somebody who's super difficult, you're dealing with more of the ego than you are with reason and
absolutely.
rationale. Yeah.
Absolutely. Two things to unpack in there, and the understanding the behavior in that stressful, because that's your natural behavior. You can put on mask and you can put on fake it to me, make it kind of things going. But whenever the rubber hits the road
Yeah.
and you're totally stressed, your natural behavior comes out. So it
Yep.
is so very helpful to understand the people that are on your team or
Yeah.
in your employees, to understand what is that natural behavior that they've got.
Um, Well, I mean, it's just being a human being.
Yeah,
And,
that's,
it's again, and, if we look at principles, every human being has a set of principles that they live by. And we also have a set of principles that we want to not live by. And
yeah.
so, I mean, if you have somebody who's, I'll give you an example, that
Hmm.
is notorious for always coming up with the reason as to why something is instead of assuming responsibility. You can pretty much count on that. This person is going to behave this way when when they're called out, right? And so
Right.
if you need them to take responsibility so that it's not a pattern of behavior, a continuous behavior moving forward, meaning that they're always blaming somebody else, or you just want them to get it right, then you have to have the right kind of conversation with them about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people don't know how to do that. And, a leader's mindset is like wrapped around about 5,000 things at any given point in time. And to be able to detach themselves from those five things, to sit down and spend an exhaustive amount of time with one person to get it right, like right now, so they don't ever do it again, that's completely unreasonable. And that's what a lot of
Yeah.
people are trying to do. And so a lot of the things that lead to success, and it's almost like going back to my car engine analogy,
That
it's like if
timing
you
line.
well, yeah, the timing, but it's like if you understand the basics of how an engine works and what kind of vehicle it works best in, then when you hear clang, clang, bang, bang coming from the back of the car, not to check the engine, to check the rear axle, right? So it's kind of the same thing. It's like over time, you learn how your vehicle of leadership is operating. And if something is going off or there's a light on, then over time you tend to know like pretty much where to look, but you aren't the mechanic. You're not always the one that's going to be able to fix everything. And
Mhm.
that's where skill building actually, you have to invest in learning how to deal with people at a wide variety of levels. And when you skill build, I was reading this quote this morning on social media. I did a big post on this. And I said, wisdom is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. So when you become wise on how you deal with people, your profits are tenfold.
Mhm. And you talked about ego, and that does so often come in and make it difficult to get to the the win-win, if you will, I guess, because that ego just keeps on blocking.
It is. And and the ego is not a bad thing. It was
Right,
actually our
right.
ego is designed to protect us, right? So it kicks in when we feel like we're threatened. The problem is that our rational thought doesn't disseminate, yes, I'm responsible for this and no, I'm not, because we know that making going a different route produces the closer desired, pain-free result as possible. But to be honest with you, if you come out and just ante up with what's going on, and I have a policy. I would much rather call out my mistakes first than being called out on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen. There are times I make mistakes, I don't even realize it. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I did do that, didn't I? And where it gets different is that when you have somebody who has that type of personality of being right, and it displays some of those narcissistic tendencies, ultimately what happens is the person that's willing to announce that they make a mistake kind of sometimes falls prey or falls victim to harsh criticism, rather than somebody being accepting of the fact that, okay, this person acknowledges they're wrong, the world should lighten up right now, and I'm sure they'll never do it again.
Mm.
But people who make mistakes confront people who make mistakes who aren't really forgiving. Now you got a recipe for just a lot of drama.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. You shared that you had to learn leadership the hard way without a mentor. And, I have been fortunate throughout my career to have people that just showed up as my mentor. I didn't have any formal
Yeah.
assignment of a mentor, but a lot of people don't today. And I think that's probably why you and I do what we do. What are some pivotal lessons that you've learned from those early experiences that really have been helping you in doing what you do today?
Oh my gosh, I could write a book on that.
You should.
I know. I have another book that I'm working on for next year to drop, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to figure out like what's the one after that. But so one of the greatest things that I learned from my favorite, all-time favorite boss that I ever worked for was how to hold people accountable. And it wasn't so much doing the accountability as what to say. And I tell this story every now and again. So this is how brilliant this man was. And he creeps him out every time I talk about him online or I write about him in a book. It's really funny. He's like, would you please stop writing about me? I'm like, no, I won't. But like we had a situation many years ago. I was invited into a manager's meeting, and he was the kind of guy that, let people kind of like hang themselves and then he'd reel them back in. And so we had three brand new minted managers, and we all knew not to do what they did. And this one girl, she comes in and, understanding that she just came from being in the position of being on the sales floor, and you had to work your way
Hmm.
into this. So she comes in and she's like, now she starts, griping about all the problems and all the negative things that are coming out of the salespeople. Why can't they do this? Why can't they? And the rest of us are silent because we know what's coming. We've all been down this road with him. And so he's just sitting there listening and listening and listening, and she's just going off, and she stops, and we're all quiet and we're all watching her and we're waiting for it, and she goes, well, doesn't anybody have anything to say? And he says, well, we're just making sure that you're done. She goes, no, I'm done. He goes, okay, great. He said, congratulations. He said, you just volunteered yourself to now go fix it. And it was absolutely brilliant. It was brilliant. And we all knew, because anytime that we complained and we didn't bring a solution to the table, he would say,
That's right.
congratulations, you just volunteered yourself now to go fix it. Because clearly you're that passionate about it. We're like, oh my gosh, right? So I never did that. I just saw it so many times, and I'm just like, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. But that's how he taught us.
Hmm. I
He
had I
taught
had
us.
two bosses that did that.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And the other thing that he used to do, and this is where I got an understanding very early on, that you have to tie what it is that you want to do to whatever your number one business objective is. And so we worked for a car dealership. And so anytime somebody say, hey, Tom, I got this suggestion, he'd say, great. Will it help us sell more cars? And if you couldn't say yes and explain to him how, he would lovingly tell you, he says, I appreciate you bringing it. He said, but that's not the right thing for us to pursue. And the other thing is that most people that brought ideas brought process ideas that made only their job easier,
Mm,
not necessarily the big picture things, right?
yeah.
So our objectives were, does it either help us sell more cars or does it help us repair more cars? And if it doesn't do either of that, it's not the right thing to pursue. And he said it exactly the same way each and every single time. So when people would come up to him, they now knew after a couple of rounds of experiencing this that the first thing out of their mouth was, I think this is going to help us sell more cars. And he was 100% all ears. He's like, okay. So what happened is that by that training and that consistency, he trained his entire staff to act and behave in a certain way without him having to over explain himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Every
he's just brilliant.
Yeah, every time somebody had a problem, they're just trying to think, okay, how can I fix this that's going to help me sell more cars or fix more cars?
Right. Exactly. And, and the thing is that, managers, micromanagers, leaders lead the way. And he was very much a man who knew how to lead the way. Even though
Yeah.
he didn't know it was the right way or not, he led the way. And the only
Yeah.
way to figure stuff out sometimes is just to engage.
So what about the situations where you do have that difficult or challenging personality that's maybe not wanting to listen to them?
Yeah. Well, in the situations that I was sharing, it's like there's only so much people that can do, right? Because they can't implement new policies, procedures without levels of authority, signing off on it, stuff like that. So, those types of things tend to get pretty contained real quick. But when you have somebody who doesn't want to listen to what's going on, one thing that I learned a long time ago, and it started with working with him, like really truly embracing this, is that there's always a reason why somebody behaves the way they do.
Yeah.
The question is, like, are you willing to find out what that is? Because it could have something to do with something in the past. It's very easy to fix. Sometimes not, and
Mhm.
it's some people just can't get over that today's a new day. Some people can if they're addressed. I teach a class, how to deal with difficult people, or why they love to argue and debate everything, why employees love to. And so, and I break it down into a couple of different types of groups. There's people that have a specific type of worldview, and then there are people that, those explosive individuals, that all of a sudden out of nowhere they just, blast you. And there's reasons for each and every single one of them. The most skilled leader is going to recognize them for what they are, and then with that skill building, I mean, it's never going to be perfect.
Right.
It just is never going to be
Right.
perfect. But with that skill building, you can set the right expectations, and if people are willing to do the work, fabulous, you won. If they're not willing to do the work, then you have to make a decision as to, okay, if I
Right.
keep this person, how is this person going to impact the rest of the team? And
Yeah.
then the other thing is that how much time is this person going to take away from me doing what it is that I have to do? So it's like you have to make a decision.
Hmm.
And I think the most dangerous leaders out there are the people that are not willing to make a decision.
Right. Right.
And that's where the rest of your team really starts getting frustrated.
Yeah. So true. So there are times where, as you said, that those leaders could become overwhelmed by um, their workforce, but also the workforce, especially today, everything changes constantly. It changes just life.
Yeah.
So those changes really impact how your team reacts to those changes and how you lead them. So what are some strategies that you would give to the leaders out there to be able to deal with people that just don't want change?
Change, here's the thing to remember about change, that you're not going to be able to address change for what it is unless you really truly understand what it does. And what
Mm,
change does is that it interrupts everybody's mastery of something. Mastery of understanding, mastery of execution, mastery of comfortable, they're comfortable, right? We I was just thinking, I totally forgot about, I did this one time. I had a team of people, including my boss, who did not get along.
mm,
And all day long, I would just constantly hear about from either one group or from him, and they just constantly clashed, absolutely constantly clashed. And one day I'm like, I can't get my work done. And so I'm like, come with me. And he goes, why? I said, we're gonna resolve this today. We're all gonna have a good day because I can't handle y'all anymore. And he said, what are you gonna do? I said, everybody put their work away. I said, go ahead, just shut everything down, put your work away, and I want you all to come out. And there was like 6 of them. And
Hmm.
I'm talking about 6 people who are just constant squabbling and constant drama. And so the room that they worked in had an entire wall of mirrors. I said, I want everybody to line up to the mirror right now. And he looks at me and I said, you too. I said, get over there. You're part of this problem. He's like, all right, fine. I said, y'all are going to have a good day. You know how you're going to do it? I said, you're going to turn around, you're going to look at yourself in the mirror, and you just stand there for exactly 1 minute. And I'm going to time it on my timer. And you're going to sit there and do nothing but smile at yourself. And they're like, what? I said, do it. I said, I'm tired of this. And so they stood there and they started smiling. And within 10 seconds, they started cracking up because it was the dumbest thing that they've ever done. And all I was doing is I was just reworking their neural pathways
Yes.
in their brain. I was
Yeah.
just making a shift. And I said, don't give up. And but they made it till about 30 seconds and they couldn't do it anymore. And the rest of the day, they're like, that was the most fun that we've had in months. And I've said, guys, listen, I said, whatever you have going on between you and him, you have to sit down and talk this thing out.
Yeah.
I said, y'all are in a much better mood. You're going to have a great rest of the day. You want to know why I know that? And he said, well, I said, because we just totally changed your brain chemistry for the rest of the day. This is the best time for you guys to sit down and figure out what is going on. And
Yeah.
so it lasted for about 3 weeks, which was pretty good. But unfortunately, neither party was willing to completely overhaul and change their ways. And I'm like, I can't sit back. I can't go back there every week and make you guys smile at yourself. You guys have to figure this out, you know? So, and it was just, and I told them, I said, you have to give, but you have to lead, and you're wanting them to be something that they're not. And
Hmm.
until you like really respect that and get it, and you don't want to have to lead them in a certain way, you have to lead them in a certain way. You have to lead them in the way you don't want to lead them. I said,
Hmm.
I know it's a lot of work, but you know what? If you lead them in the way that they need to be led, you're going to have far more better days than you are what you've had for the past year and a half.
And I think that's really important for the leaders out there, the audience to hear, especially as we mentioned earlier, that there are coming up on 5 generations that do things that are motivated differently, are triggered differently, and it is more work. Sorry, being a leader sometimes is going to be hard,
Yeah,
and
it is.
I think that we as a society, as organizations, need to do the mentoring and the coaching of our potential leaders to have them the tools to be great leaders. And we aren't doing that, and that's why you and I are out here. But still, I think they've got to recognize that it just because they were really good at fixing cars does not mean they'll be a great leader or manager. And just because they were great at spreadsheets does not mean that they will be having the people skills that are needed to make that team high performing.
And vice versa. People who have mastered people skills may not necessarily do, those types of singular activities very well at all.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, that's the blessing, the curse of humanity is that, we all come in different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, colors of the rainbow. We're all single different, every single one of us. But we all have a lot to contribute, and that's just what happens is that we get in our own way of recognizing that everybody in our world is a contribution because we don't always like what we see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the emotional toll leadership can take, especially when things aren't going well.
Yeah.
So these, how do you advise the leaders on managing their own emotions while dealing with all of the difficult dynamics that are going on with the team?
Well, first off, acknowledging how you feel is the most important thing. And that's what I mean when I tell people that you have to deal with yourself first, is
Yeah.
it's perfectly fine for you to feel what it is that you're feeling. How you act on it or what you do with it after that is what's going to either make or break your situation. And there are times like, when I'm in a high crisis mode, I have no luxury whatsoever to acknowledge how I'm feeling. I have to compartmentalize.
Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with, for some weird reason in my career, I have dealt with a tremendous amount of just like workplace violence.
Mm.
And more so than I have ever heard any other HR person. It's just what I've come up against, a lot of clients experiencing stuff. So I've seen a lot of things done a lot of different ways. And, I've successfully consulted to over 600 small businesses, and I've worked for 6 Fortune 500 companies now. So I've definitely had a full career. It's a good way of putting it. But, when I'm in the midst of crisis and I've got to focus in on doing the right thing each and every single time, so then that way there's that delicate balance when you're an HR person doing what's in the best interest of the employee and doing what's in the best interest of the company.
Yeah.
And it's easy to misstep, and it's easy to get absorbed in your own mind about it. So I have to compartmentalize. When I'm done with it, that's when I go in and I start taking care of myself. I have to. I have to disconnect for a little bit. When I'm probably my most scariest experience was working through an active shooter situation, stopped it. But it was a week of very, very high intensity, and my mind was completely absorbed. When I got done with all of that and we got to a point where things were calming down, um, I crashed hard on that one. And I was
Yeah.
ready for it because I could feel everything building up. But I have a process of which I take care of myself. And like I did it just this past week and I completely disconnected. I did things that I wanted to do. I did things that were relaxing. I sat out on my lawn in front of a fire with my iPad watching
Nice.
1886 or whatever, 1883, or whatever that show is, right? I just power watched it. It was awesome, but that gave me the mental break that I needed. And what happens is that leaders especially high level leaders, there's so much coming at you. And unless you make you as a priority,
Yeah.
mind, physical, spiritual, um church is a priority for me.
Yeah.
Every Sunday, nobody gets to interrupt that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a priority. It's where I learn.
Right.
It's where I recharge spiritually. I work out every day. Nobody gets to interrupt that. Doesn't matter what's going on. I'm going to go do
Mm-hmm.
my workout. Sometimes it's at 10, 11, 12 at night. Sometimes it's at 5:30 in the morning, but I still get it in. Right. So I mean, you have to make space for your party, and that includes your family too. If you have a
Yeah.
family, your family can be a great outlet. And when you invest in your family, when you invest in the time and you invest in the closeness, that also makes you whole as a parent as well. So there's a wide variety of things. And if you look at the things that you're booking yourself to do as blessings, you're feeding your emotional bank account, which is what you need
Yeah.
to do.
And I really think that's so important because you can't really face difficult people problems if you aren't okay and
No.
have because all of those other things that you would normally be able to control and compartmentalize, you can't
No.
because you're just exhausted, you're overwhelmed or whatnot.
And the mental soup that goes on in your head, when it
Yeah.
starts getting to that raging boil, you're gonna get lost in it. You get lost
Yeah.
in your confidence, and you get lost in the conversations in your head, and eventually what was once an assumed idea all of a sudden becomes the truth after a while.
uh
And that's the great thing about constantly putting yourself in a learning state, is that you're breaking that cycle.
yeah.
You're breaking that cycle of limiting self-belief.
So time has flown by. We could probably talk for hours on this and, probably need to talk for hours on this subject. As I said, it's unfortunately not something that is, you know, not evident in businesses, small and large. But it is time for me to share my screen with the contact information for Brenda. So if this has intrigued you, motivated you, inspired you to say, I need to do something. I have this in my workplace. I just need to get to understand how to deal with the difficult people, difficult teams, or, maybe I'm the cause of it, and I recognize that now, and I want to know some more. So I'm going to share the screen with contact information. If you are watching, you can get a screenshot. If you're listening, I have all the information on my YouTube channel, Vicki Nettling. So please do subscribe, or my findyourleadershipconfidence.com. So everybody should send Brenda a huge thank you note, because most everything is her name, which is always easier for you all out there. So the website is Brenda Vatel. Vatal, sorry, said it wrong.
It's okay. No one gets it right.
Brenda Neckvatal. And the Facebook is the same, but it's Brenda.Neckvatal. And Instagram is Brenda Neckvatal. TikTok at Brenda Neckvatal. LinkedIn is just her last name, Neckvatal. And YouTube is at Brenda Neckvatal. And for those that are just listening, the spelling of the last name is Neckvatal. And YouTube is at Brenda Vatal, and eSpeakers is her name, Brenda Neckvatal. All right, so Miss Brenda is going to share with you her call to action for today, things that you can find on her website, any resources, links, and also where she spends the most time for social media that you might be able to DM her to get some more immediate, if you will, kind of reaction.
Thank you so much. So yes, you can DM me on any of these sites. I'm spread out equally amongst all of them. I pay attention to make sure that I respond to every single one of them every day. But I am going to give you an opportunity to go ahead and take advantage of a free gift from me. And what this is if you go to my website, which is a lot easier to spell than my last name, which is yobrenda.com. And I have this because my business partner, who I wrote the book with, Mission Ready, Building High Performing Teams from the Battlefield to the Boardroom, is a retired Navy SEAL. And every time we get on the phone, he goes, yo, like really. So I came up with Yo Brenda as my easy win. Go. You can remember that when you're driving, listening to this type of website. But if you find yourself running into a wall and not really know exactly what to do or to say, more specifically what to say to somebody, and you're experiencing a lot of drama, I have a free course. It's called Impact Scripts. And these are 3 scripts that I have developed and used for many years, many years, to get to the heart and to the root cause of what is going on, and actually help leaders slice through all of that drama so that way they can grow and lead their teams to whole new levels of success. So those 3 scripts, I'm going to give you one of them just so you can understand, is that when you use the phrase, help me understand, help me understand this, help me understand why we're doing it, help me understand what happened, help me understand. And what you're doing by saying that is you're taking away the person, the individual out of the conversation. You're just asking for the information. And it is extremely effective. It's probably one of the most effective things I say. And apparently I say it on a regular basis, because I even realize I say it all the time, don't even realize it. So I've been informed of that recently. So so that is my gift to you. And it will it's a very helpful class. It's broken down into several sections, so then that way you can take it on your own free time. But it's at yobrenda.com. All you do is fill out your information, and it's going to ask you, you heard me say something pretty smashing, or something that like really resonated with you today. And I'm always curious to know what that is. So it's going to ask you, what was the one thing that you took away from today, what you heard from me?
Awesome. Brenda, you are just such a wealth of great information, and thank you for doing what you do. And I'm so glad that you do the self-care so that you can continue being impactful in what you do. Thanks for being a great guest.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.